You can't hear me back there? Okay. So we've been for the past few weeks studying heroes in faith from Hebrews 11. And so tonight I drew Judges to talk about. Now, there's an entire book in the Old Testament just specifically for the Judges. The judges of Israel were leaders who ruled over the Israelites during the period between the conquest of Canaan after the death of Joshua and the establishment of the monarchy with Saul as the first king. The time frame on this is roughly from the beginning of the 14th century BC to the 11th century BC. When they came out of the wilderness into the promised land, the land of Canaan, it was divided up among all the tribes. And that's a whole other lesson in itself. But, I wonder about the Israelites because it seemed like they didn't learn their lessons. Because once they got in this land, they still had a lot of problems. They would go into sin, and God would have to rescue them. But these judges were raised up by God to lead the Israelites during the times of crisis, especially when they were oppressed by foreign powers. The book of Judges actually follows a recurring pattern. They would get in there, they would get involved with the other nations, start worshiping their gods, and get into sin. And so then things would get rough, and God would allow oppression by these enemies because they were sinning. They weren't following Him. God had warned them before, don't mix with these other people, because He knew when they did, they would be influenced by their gods. So anyway, God allowed these other enemies to oppress them because of their sins. And then when they did, had this oppression, then they would call on God, help us out. We've got to get out from under this. So that's true. And they get to relying on themselves, not on God. And in that book you gave us, they talked about something called situation ethics, where you do according to the situation that you're in. And that's what these Israelites would do. When they didn't need God, they would just do whatever. But as soon as these other enemies came in and started taking over, then they would cry out for God to help them. And when He did, because of God's love for His people, He would raise up a judge to come in and help them and to deliver them. And then peace would be restored. They would defeat these other countries. But then what would happen? After they got peace restored, a few more years, here they go again. So this cycle happened. Well, there were actually 12 judges altogether. And we're not going to look at all of those. But let's look at Judges 3, 1 through 3. Judges 3, 1 through 3. This one, I don't guess I had questions about it, but it just sort of surprised me a little bit when I studied it. But it says, Now these are the nations that the Lord left to test Israel by them, that is, all in Israel who had not experienced all the wars of Canaan. It was only in order that the generations of the people of Israel might know war, to teach war to those who had not known it before. These are the nations, the 5 lords of the Philistines, and all the Canaanites, and the Sidonians, and the Hivites who lived on Mount Lebanon, from Mount Baal Harbon as far as Lebo Hamath. So, in other words, God left those nations there, it says, to test the Israelites, to teach them. So sometimes I think, when we have hardships, that may be to teach us a lesson. We become strengthened by things like that. But anyway, that was Judges 3, 1 through 3. Now, the first judge, I said there was 12 listed in the book of Judges. I'm not sure if that was all of them or not, but that's all that are named. But the first one was Othniel, and that was about 1374 BC. And he delivered Israel from Cusha Rishathaim of Mesopotamia. And from what I read, they've really not found anything about Othniel in secular history. But he is listed as the first judge in the book of Judges. Now, the study that we're going to do tonight is going to be focused on the 4 that are mentioned in Hebrews 11. And they were the ones who had faith in God, and they could to defeat their enemies. So someone want to read Hebrews 11, 32 through 34. Hebrews 11, 32 through 34. Okay, thank you. So there were actually, 6 people mentioned there? There was Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, and Samuel. Now, this lesson tonight was to focus on the judges. One thing on Barak, he's listed in Judges, but he's not actually named as the judge. He helped Deborah. Deborah was the only female judge listed, and Barak was the leader of her army. So let's go back now and read Judges. Let's see what I got up here. I don't have that there. Judges 4, 1 through 4. Judges 4, 1 through 4.
And the people of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord after Ehud died, and the Lord sold them into the hand of Jabin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. The commander of his army was Sisera, who lived in Harosheth Hagoyim, and the people of Israel cried out to the Lord for help, for he had 900 chariots of iron, and he oppressed the people of Israel cruelly for 20 years. And now Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth, was judging Israel at that time.
Okay, so Deborah was the judge, but she told Barak to gather his men. Well, there we go. That was my little illustration for it. Deborah and Barak. And she told him to gather your men at Mount Tabor. taking 10,000 from the people of Naphtali and the people of Zebulun, and I will draw out Sisera, the general of Jabin's army, to meet you by the river Kishon with his chariots and his troops, and I will give them into your hand. So Deborah sent him out to do that. However, Barak insisted that Deborah go with him. Evidently, he didn't feel comfortable going by himself, so he said that Deborah must go with him. She agreed, but said the honor for defeating Sisera would not go to him, but would go to a woman instead. Does anyone right offhand remember that story? I'm going to get to it in just a minute, but anyway, Sisera came with his 900 chariots of iron and all the men who were with him. And when they were defeated by Barak, and Sisera escaped on foot and went to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, who was at peace with Jabin, the king of Hazor, in the house of Heber the Kenite. So he escaped, but he thought he was going to get away. And he went in, and she gave him, I guess, let him stay there. But he got there, and he asked her for some water. He needed a drink. So she brought him some milk and let him lay down and take a nap. While he was taking a nap, she took a nail and drove it through his temple and killed him. That's why Barak did not get the credit for killing him, because Jael did it. It said that no, Jael killed Sisera. He was one of the enemy, and she drove that nail through his temple into the ground. Right, it said she nailed him to the ground. She was the wife of Heber the Kenite, and in Numbers 10:29 through 32, we find that Heber's father, Hobab, was the son of Reuel the Midianite, Moses' father-in-law. So all these people were interconnected some way. Hobab, as Moses asked, into the promised land and settled near Kadesh in Naphtali. Since Heber went with Moses into the promised land with the Israelites, he possibly could have been a Jewish proselyte, and probably Jael was an Israelite. And so, but anyway, that's a little speculation in there because of the situation that took place. So that's what happened. Barak, he didn't want to take on, I'm trying to think of the name of that group. It was Canaan, the king of Canaan, Jabin. He didn't want to take on those troops by himself. He wanted Deborah to go with him. But anyway, they did, and they defeated them. But he didn't get credit for killing their captain, as Deborah told him he would not. But that was Barak. And actually, it does not list him, like I say, as a judge, but he worked closely with the judge, Deborah. Okay, does anyone have anything they want to add to that story?
It's just interesting to me that Barak, when you read the account in Judges 4 there, Barak seems like he is not the most courageous of the people in the story. I would rank Deborah above him, and even Jael, because she gets the glory for killing Sisera. But when you get to Hebrews 11, Barak is mentioned as someone of faith. So obviously, even though he wanted Deborah to replied, "If she comes with me, then we'll be protected because the Lord will take care of her."
Right. Well, Deborah had been selected as the judge, and he just, I guess maybe, like you say, he felt more comfortable having her there because she had God's behind her. And I couldn't find anybody that really had a whole lot of speculation about why they mentioned him instead of Deborah, but they did. Okay, so he was the first one of that was listed in the list of judges there. Okay, the next one that we're going to talk about was Gideon. And he's another one that has some stories about him that we've studied a lot. And by the same token, he was one that we questioned a little bit too. He was of the tribe of Manasseh. Now Manasseh, if I'm not mistaken, was one of Joseph's sons. He had two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And this was one of them. So the Israelites had sinned again. And he had given them into the hands of Midian for 7 years. Abraham had a son named Midian by his second wife, Keturah. Midian's descendants came to live in northwest Arabia. When Moses fled from the Egyptians, he lived in Midian for 40 years. And he took a wife named Zipporah. Probably you remember that name, it's a little unusual, Zipporah. She was the daughter of a priest named Reuel, or Jethro. And although Moses found them to be a friendly people, they later became enemies of Israel. But these were the descendants of Midian, who was Abraham's son. So there was a little relationship in there between them as well. All right, let's read Judges 6 through 9 now.
And Israel was brought very low because of Midian. And the people of Israel cried out for help to the Lord. And the people of the Lord cried out to the Lord on account of the Midianites. The Lord sent a prophet to them from the people of Israel. He said to them, "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, I led you up from Egypt, brought you out of the house of slavery, and I delivered you from the hand of the Egyptians, from the hand of all who oppressed you, drove them out before you, and gave you your land."
Okay, that's it. Thank you. So he just reminded them there of what he had done. All right, after they had taken over, God sent the angel of the Lord to Gideon. Let me see if I can find that verse. Okay. Verse 11 and 12. It says, "Now came the angel of the Lord and sat under the terebinth at Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, while his son Gideon was beating out wheat in the winepress to hide it from the Midianites." So he was trying to get the wheat so he could conceal it so the Midianites couldn't take it, I assume. "And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, 'The Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor.'" Now we're going to read some things that makes us question that just a little bit. But it said, he said to him, "Please, Lord, how can I save Israel? Behold, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house." But the Lord said to him, "But I will be with you, and you shall strike the Midianites as one man, And he said to him, For if now I have found favor in your eyes, then show me a sign that is you who speak with me. Please do not depart from here until I come to you and bring out my present and set it before you. And he said, I will stay till you return. So Gideon went into his house and prepared a young goat and unleavened cakes from an ephah of flour. The meat he put in a basket, and the broth he put in a pot. And he brought them to him under the terebinth and presented them. And the angel of God said to him, Take the meat and the unleavened cakes and put them on this rock, and pour the broth over them. And he did so. Then the angel of the Lord reached out the tip of the staff that was in his hand and touched the meat and the unleavened cakes, and fire sprang up from the rock and consumed the meat and unleavened cakes. And the angel of the Lord vanished from his sight. So when that happened, it says Gabriel perceived that he was the angel of the Lord. And he says, Alas, O Lord God, for now I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face. But the Lord said to him, Peace be to you, do not fear, you shall not die. So Gideon built an altar there to the Lord and called it, The Lord is Peace. It says, to this day it still stands at Ophrah, which belongs to the Abiezrites. And then, evidently, Gabriel's father had built some altars there to Baal and Asherah. And the Lord said, Take your father's bull and the second bull 7 years old, and pull down the altar of Baal that your father has, and cut down the Asherah that is beside it. The Asherah was the female god for them. And build an altar to the Lord your God on the top of the stronghold here, with stones laid in due order. Then take the second bull and offer it as a burnt offering with the wood of Asherah that you shall cut down. So we see here how brave Gideon was, because he says, now Gideon took 10 men of his servants and did as the Lord told him. But because he was too afraid of his family and the men of the town to do it by day, he did it by night. So he slipped out at night, tore down the altar of Baal, cut down the Asherah. And the Asherah, from what I read, was probably a pillar of wood. And he cut it down and used it for the fire to put on the altar. When they rose the next day and found out that Baal was broken down, and they'd had an offering there on the altar, they said, Who has done this thing? And they looked around and searched, and they found out that Gideon, the son of Joash, had done it. Remember, his father was the one who had put up the gods in the first place. So they told Joash, Bring out your son that he may die, for he has broken down the altar of Baal and cut down the Asherah beside it. But Joash wouldn't do that. He said to all those who stood against him, Will you contend for Baal, or will you save him? Whoever contends for him shall be put to death by morning. If he is a god, let him contend for himself, because his altar has been broken down. Therefore, on that day, Gideon was called Jerubbaal. That is to say, let Baal contend against him, because he broke down his altar. Okay, so now the Midianites and the Amalekites and the people of the east came together, and they crossed the Jordan and encamped in the valley of Jezreel. But the Spirit of the Lord clothed Gideon, and he sounded the trumpet, and the Abiezrites were called out to follow him. And he sent messengers throughout all Manasseh, and they too were called out to follow him. So he sent out for people to help him. Then again, he sort of, I'd say he tested God sort of here to make sure that he was doing what he wanted. And we probably remember this story too. He put out the fleece on the threshing floor. And he said, if there's dew on the fleece, but not on the ground around it, then I shall know that you will save Israel. And so the next morning he got up, and it says he squeezed out enough dew out of the fleece to fill up a bowl. And the ground around it was dry. But that still really wasn't quite enough. He says, don't be mad at me, but let's do this. Let's put the fleece out again, and this time let it be dry and let the ground be wet with the dew. And God did so that night. So it was dry on the fleece, and all the ground around was dew. So now he's gone through all these tests. He's ready to take on the enemy.
No, Linda, I find it so interesting that, that when the angel of the Lord appeared to him, that, we understand that it's widely understood, maybe not everybody would know this, but that the angel of the Lord represents Christ.
Right, that's pretty much the...
Get into the New Testament and talking about angels, there's not talking about the angel, but
Right.
the angel of the Lord. And so here's Christ that appeared to him, and almighty warrior, who me? I mean, think about how God can work in our lives. That I'm a nobody. Again, or like Moses, make an excuse or whatever. But God said, through the angel, here's what you do. And then just as you just read there that the Spirit of the Lord came upon Gideon. So he was doing all this, and here's God just big building, go do all of these things. So now he's mobile. Now
Yeah.
God's Spirit, he says, well, God, if it's really you,
Then do...
do this.
Yeah.
It does. So, how many of us would be so bold as to ask God to do certain things like that? But, showing his faith is what's reflected there in Hebrews 11. That, oh my goodness, here he goes from,
Well,
wanting to hide the wine press, to being this great warrior in God's army.
well, apparently he was a little bit meek at the beginning, but by the end of it, though, he did defeat the enemy. I mentioned that the last time he asked God to do something, he says, let not your anger burn against me. In other words, don't be mad at me, but I still want one more thing.
It's almost like he knew he was asking a lot.
Right.
Like, almost like he was like, I know I should be okay with what you showed me, but I want one more thing,
Right.
I find it interesting that a lot of times in the Bible, people who ask for a sign from God are kind of ridiculed sometimes. Like in the New Testament, Jesus will ridicule people for asking for a sign and say, like, the only sign you'll get is the sign of Jonah, talking about the resurrection. But here, God actually obliges and does give a sign. Maybe he just knows the heart of Gideon and knows he has the faith in him. He just needs a little help.
And he knew what it was going to take, and
Yeah.
he did it. Okay.
When somebody claims today that they're a Gideon, what does that mean?
Now, there's a group of people, men, that call themselves Gideons, that hand out Bibles. Now, I'm not sure if that's what you're talking about. It's just a name they gave themselves.
I think it's actually from the inside cover of the history of the Gideons there.
Yeah.
You guys sat together in say early 1900s, 1920s, I don't know. And they said, what, we need to be able to, we need to get the word out as big as we can. And so they got together, they formed a club, started passing out
Actually, they passed out New Testaments mainly for the schools. They also put Bibles in motels and hotels and things like that. Yeah, but that's a name they picked for themselves. I don't think so. Other than that was his name.
they picked the name Gideons after to mimic the model of Gideon here because he's an ordinary guy. when he was there alone. But the weaknesses in people, God uses those as a force multiplier to bring out his glory. So, yeah, we're weak, but that's where God makes us strong, just like the walls.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. All right. So Gideon, he sent out a call for people to come in and help. And he actually got 32,000 men to come in. And God looked at those 32,000 men and said, you don't need that many. That's way too many. So he told him that anyone who was scared or trembling should go back home. So 22,000 of them went back home. And that left him with 10,000 to fight the Midianites. Now, God looked at it and says, you don't need that many. That's too many. So he told them to take them to the stream and let them drink. And those who lap water with their hands, keep them. Those who bend down and drink out of the stream, send them home. So he ended up with 300. Everybody else he sent home. So now he's got 300 men, and it says that, I think the term was that the Midianites were like locusts on a stream or something. There were so many, they couldn't really number them. So, but he's got 300 men. So he takes his servant, and I don't remember his name, Purah, took his servant Purah, and he sneaked into the camp and listened to the Midianites. And he heard one of them saying a dream that he had had. He said, I dreamed a dream, and behold, a cake of barley bread tumbled into the camp of Midian, and came to the tent and struck it so that it fell and turned upside down, and so that the tent lay flat. And his comrade there answered, this is no other than the sword of Gideon, the son of Joash, a man of Israel. God has given into his hand Midian and all the camp. In other words, Gideon, with his 300 men, were going to take that entire camp. And somewhere there, I think it said without number. There were just so many of them, they didn't even give the number. But, does anyone remember how he did that? He gave each one of the men a trumpet and a pitcher with a lamp inside it. And so they slipped in at night, and they broke their lamp, and they said, a sword for the Lord and for Gideon, around the camp with these lamps burning. It confused the Midianites so much, they were falling on each other's swords. In other words, they were killing each other. So they fled. And then, as they ran away, the men of Israel were called out from Naphtali and Asher and Manasseh, and they pursued after the Midianites. So Gideon sent out for them, and I assume that these were the leaders, but it says they pursued Midian, and they brought the heads of Arab and Zeb to Gideon across the Jordan. So they went ahead and rounded up the rest of the Midianites. So that's how Gideon defeated the Midianites as a judge. Okay. I think I probably skipped a few slides here. I get to talking and forget what I'm doing. There was the illustration with the trumpet and the lamp. Okay, the next one is Zephthah. And he's got a story about him too. Actually, Zephthah was the son of a harlot. And at some point, the people sent him away. Got too many notes. He was the son of a harlot, and he had been driven out of his father's house. However, when they started getting in trouble by the Ammonites, they called for Jephthah to come and read them. It said he was a valiant warrior. So they called for him to come and help them out. And his response was, "Did you not hate me and drive me from my father's house? So now, why have you come to me when you're in trouble?" Nevertheless, he did agree to help them. Jephthah agreed that he would help them to defeat the Ammonites. And when he went into battle with the Ammonites, he made a vow that you'll remember when we talk about it. He vowed that he would sacrifice the first thing that came out of his house to greet him when he got home, if he beat the Ammonites. He would make a burnt offering of the first thing. Well, he subdued or beat the Ammonites, and when he got home, he had one child, a daughter. She came out the door to greet him. And it says he kept his vow. Now, it really didn't give any details or anything else, but it did say that he was true to his vow. In fact, he told his daughter what he had done, and he said, "I made a vow that I would sacrifice the first thing." And his daughter told him that if you made the vow, then you have to do it. So she said, "Let me go spend a couple of weeks with my friends and then come back." And that's where the story ended. But anyway, he did make that vow. So that was Jephthah. And we got, what, about 2 minutes? The last one probably needs no telling, but it's about Samson. Samson was the strongest man, I assume, that ever lived, because at one point he killed, several Philistines with the jawbone of a donkey, or he killed a lion with his bare hands. He had one problem, though. He liked the ladies. He was not a very moral person. So he fell in love with a Philistine woman, Delilah, and she asked him, "How come you're so strong?" And he gave her several different answers. One, he said, "If you bind me with new ropes, it'll take my strength away." And he told her something else. But she did that about 3 times. Finally, he broke down and said, "Well, if you cut my hair off, I'll lose my strength." Because when he was born, they'd made what's called the Nazarite vow, that his head would never be shaved. And so when she cut his hair off, they came in and bound him. They poked out his eyes, and they put him to work grinding the grain. And eventually his hair grew back, his strength grew back. Evidently his faith grew, and he wanted God to help him out. So they took him to a party they had to put him on display to show what they had done, had his eyes. And so he got between the columns and had somebody put him between the columns. And he prayed to God, and God gave him the strength, and he collapsed the building there and killed more Philistines, it said, than he had in his lifetime. So that was Samson, excuse me. Samuel was the last judge before the kings. Okay.
Samuel, interestingly enough, was also under a Nazarite vow from the time of his birth.
Yeah.
By his mother. So.
Okay. Now that was it. That's the judges. Appreciate your comments. Will the teams come back?
Study of Jephthah last year. And I missed the end part.
I'm told that if I teach the class, I also have to do